Welcome to the Stop Down Photography Podcast, episode 78. I'm Scott Davenport. Today's topic is about endurance and its role in your photography. Hi, welcome. Thanks for joining me. I'm glad to be back with you for another chat about photography, this shared passion of ours. And in today's episode, let's take one more step on our never-ending journey of photography. Creating art with our photography is a long game pursuit. Year after year of practice, learning, more practice, a fair amount of failure, falling short of envisioned images or artistic goals. It takes stamina, stick-to-itiveness. It takes endurance. A photographer needs just a level of grit to keep at it, keep pursuing art. So let's talk about that in today's episode. If you enjoyed this podcast, please share it with a friend on social media with your camera club. And if you can, please leave a rating for the podcast. You can leave a rating directly in the Apple Podcasts app or on the web at podchaser.com. Links are in the show notes for both, as fresh, current ratings help other photographers find out about the show. The topic of endurance entered my mind this week because of a hike. Last week I took a hike in the local mountains of San Diego County, and it was a good one. Good weather, great sky, got some wonderful photos. And as I was driving back into town, reflecting on the hike, my muscles were certainly happy. I was off the trail, the pack was stowed in the car, and that got me thinking about stamina, about endurance. This hike that I took required a certain level of endurance, but endurance has a role in photography, and it is part of our pursuit to create art with our cameras. So this hike, this made me think about endurance in the physical sense for sure. And for landscape photographers, there is an obvious physical nature to our photography. We get out into the world to make our images. Sometimes that's a long drive or extended travel, a bunch of hours in a car or a flight or both. That is a level of endurance. And honestly, I'm not as good as I used to be with a long road trip. I've got to break up a drive more. I'll tap out at about 5 hours or so. The endurance of getting to a location. It might mean a long walk. It might mean a steep incline or lots of steps. My hike last weekend was at elevation, about 5,000 feet or so above sea level. So the air's a little thinner, breathing's a little heavier. Treks often involve a pack, right? We got our camera gear with us. We need our gear with us. Tripods, filters, bodies. It all adds weight. The physical endurance is simply needed to reach the places we want to photograph. And then we get there, and there's more, right? Once we're on location, how long are you going to be there? Standing in a single spot for a couple of hours, a few hours, it's actually kind of draining. Amplify that if the weather is hot or very cold or windy or rainy. That pack you're carrying, are you in a place you can put it down? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. I have to say, landscape photography has given me a new appreciation for people with jobs that require a lot of standing. Working the floor at a store or a security guard in a bank or a museum, servers at restaurants, nurses, oh my gosh, nurses. Just being on your feet for an extended period, you need endurance. It's necessary for photography. And it's not just landscape photographers, right? Wedding photographers. You're photographing a wedding, you're on your feet all day. The ceremony, the reception, and then after that, late nights editing. Probably every weekend in high season for weddings. Sports photographers, the same thing. I'm thinking of American football, but it could be any field sport. Hustling up and down the field to get the photos. Several cameras slung over your shoulders and around your neck. Usually longer lenses, so they're heavier. Stamina is needed to keep pace with the game. Commercial or fashion photographers might have this too. A long shoot for a concept, skipping meals, multiple clients booked back to back. The list goes on and on. Photography demands a level of physical endurance. Definitely true for landscape photography, that one for sure. And as I thought more about the relationship of endurance and photography, I realized it's much more than just the physical endurance. There's mental stamina required as well. Photographers need a certain amount of mental fortitude. Like I said at the top, photography is a long game pursuit. It's a slow burn. We know this. We've talked about this on the podcast. Nobody is born knowing the exposure triangle or rules of composition or how to use a camera. It all must be learned, and it all takes deliberate practice over the long haul, continued, sustained effort. That's stamina, that's endurance. And we create a lot of photos in our time. Most of our individual photos, those are just mere markers, like a sliver of our learning slowly stacking up and building up toward mastery of our craft. We'll take in critique, sometimes sobering feedback on our work. Let's use a kind term, sobering feedback. We hit creative ruts. We find ways to muscle through them. Endurance is a quality that every photographer has, and there may be times it wears thin, yet it plays an important role in our lives as photographers. So whether you're on a long hike to location and you feel the weight of your pack with every step, or you're in a creative rut struggling to make the next frame, remember to endure. Every time you reach for the camera, step out into the world, and press the shutter, that endurance puts you closer to your next great photo. Thinking back to this hike I took last weekend, it was to Garnet Peak. This is a wonderful overlook from the Sunrise Highway. This is about an hour to an hour and a half or so outside of San Diego. And it took some doing to get there. I wanted to take it in at sunrise. Sunrise right around now in Southern California, 5:30 in the morning. So roll that back. Takes me an hour and a half to get there. I have an hour maybe or so to hike from the staging area to the peak. So, it's you're starting the day 2 in the morning to get to this place for the sunrise. And I ended up being on the trails for about 3 hours or so, all said and done. So I got back to my car, and it certainly felt good to sit down to back of the car, get the pack off my back, grab some water. But I noticed I wasn't as physically tired as I thought I would be. Now I'm sure there's a bit of a natural high still kicking in because this morning was a really, really good one. One of the photos I took is on stopdownpodcast.com along with this episode. But my physical endurance, it was pretty darn good. And I'm going to turn 50 at the end of this year. And as I've gotten older, especially in the last year during lockdown, I've made physical exercise a priority for me. My children are reaching college age, and so I see a future where I have more time to dedicate to photography, and I want to have the physical means to continue to pursue it, to get to those locations that I want to visit, at least as best as I can control. So, exercise, stay active, try to keep fit. And the effort was realized on this hike. Even with my 20-pound or so pack in tow, I wasn't huffing and puffing my way up and down the mountain. And that meant I could focus more on the photography, seeing the photo opportunities, and creating better art. So I just noticed there's this relationship with the physical endurance. Having a level of it, it will allow you to spend your mental energy on the photography, creating art. You're not as physically drained, and you're able to be more creative as a result. You're not as physically drained, and that physical drain will decrease your creativity. So there is this relationship between the physical endurance and the creativity of making your photographs. One other bit of studio news is a new software tool. On One released No Noise AI, their noise reduction software, this past week, and I was lucky to get a copy of it a couple of days before it was released, so I was able to play with it and put out a thoughtful, more full review. I'll put a link in the show notes to it. But if you're doing photography that is captured at high ISO or low light, anything where you've got a healthy amount of noise in the photos, check out No Noise AI from On One. It does a very, very good job at removing noise, and it's very, very fast. I compared it to Lightroom, and I compared it to On1's Photo Raw, their existing product, or and of course, No Noise AI did better. I expected that. I also compared it against Topaz's Denoise AI. That's kind of the market leader, at least as I see it. They're the top dog when it comes to noise removal. On1's product holds its own. The results are comparable, and it's fast. It's just much faster than Topaz's product. So it's worth checking out. There's a 14-day free trial. You can get the software, play with it, work with it. There's a couple of other advantages I think that On1's product has over Topaz. And I have a link in the show notes to my full review, and I think I did about a 20-minute video showing all the different features of the No Noise AI and how it all works. It's a really, really solid product, so I do encourage you to go check it out. Before I sign off this week, thanks as always to the members of our Patreon community. It is your support that makes this podcast possible, and also supports the free tutorials and other things like product reviews, like No Noise AI, that I'm doing over on YouTube. So thank you very, very much for your continued support. I can't tell you enough how much I appreciate you being there and letting me bounce ideas off of you. Last week I shared some thoughts about what I'm considering for workshops in the coming year. Got a few private messages and you giving me some feedback, so thank you for all of that. I'm still figuring out what the 2022 workshop schedule will be, and it's nice that there is a group of photographers there that kind of like the board of directors here for the podcast, and to a degree, the photo business. So thank you again for being there and supporting this show and my work. If you're interested in learning more about the Patreon community, check the show notes. There is a support the show button on every page of stopdownpodcast.com. And in addition to the Patreon group, there are many zero-cost ways that you can support this podcast. And one of those is a rating. Please, if you can, leave a rating through Apple Podcasts or on the web at podchaser.com. And that'll do it for this week. Keep that endurance up. Photographers do endure. And if you're in one of these ruts or one of these spots where you're feeling a rough patch in your photography, keep moving forward, keep at it. You will get through it, and your next great photo might just be around the corner. Until next time, my name's Scott Davenport. Have fun.